with a little short presentation about how I got to this point where I wanted to speak about this platform. So why? Of course, when you have a home there and being interested in tech, you need to do some automation. So often when you get some products that have the opportunity to be automated, you right away go into how can I automate this. And Phillips Hue lights, for example, are a great source for automation. And there are a lot of built-in functionalities you can use in the official Phillips Hue app in itself. So, and you can integrate with other solutions as well. So that brings me to the second point. How can I use Microsoft technology for that automation? Philips Hue have a remote API, so that makes sense to explore how can we use that, and how can I use some of the exciting serverless automation solutions in Microsoft. I started actually with doing some automation of my lights with Azure Functions. I did some logic apps, different kinds of solution, PowerShell, and so on. But that required a bit amount of coding, so I wasn't sure if that was something that was really shareable, which was good for me to nerd about, but a lot of coding with some of that serverless functions. Another reason why I do this is kind of explore the technology from Microsoft and bring that out to the community. So it's part of my contribution to the community, and also the last part is learning. If you set yourself a goal to say, I want to use Power Automate with Philips Hue, I can tell you, you will learn a lot along the way. And I have most certainly did that. So that's another big part of why I did this. So how did I do it? Well, I explored some different alternatives when I decided I want to do this in Power Platform. So the good solution and acceptable for many will just be to get the access token and refresh token from the remote API and just store that in a list or something in your personal, in your team, or in a list in SharePoint Online or something. And then you can renew that when needed. Philips Hue has quite long-lived tokens. They have a 7 days access token and 112 days for the refresh token. So as long as you refresh that token inside the 112 days, then you can basically live on forever with that solution. Alternate, you can use if this then that solutions, which also could be used in Flows or PowerApps, and also have a connector to Philips Hue. So you can do simpler solutions than I did. A better solution would be to look at Power Automate flows. The Power App is really optional if you just want to automate stuff, but it brings a nice user interface to the whole. You can use flow triggers instead of Power Apps if you want to do that. You can store any secrets, like when you go to a remote API, then you need to have a client ID, a client secret or something, and store that somewhere. That's sensitive information. Everybody that gets access to that can also start doing something against your Hue system. So this is just for personal use. So if you are going to build something that only you are going to build, then you can stay on the Power Automate and Power App side. The best solution I found was to keep the secrets away from end users and implement logic for getting tokens at, let's call it, a business layer, and abstract that from the user part. So this made that my solution can be shared in an organization. Let's say that your offices at your organization have some Hue system or other kinds of variant of that. And then you can share that solution between all the users, and even though they don't have access to the secrets. So That's what I built. The solution was a PowerApp with some screens. I had a screen for just showing the connection and confirming that I did have a connection to the remote API. And also I created a screen for setting the lights manually, but also being able to synchronize with Teams presence. And that's what's maybe my end goal with the whole project. So the app was quite simple to build. It's powered by flows, back the different actions here, and some of those flows call over to logic apps, and that's where I built business logic. So basically, it's a three-part solution. We have the Phillips Hue remote API on the right side there. We are using OpenID Connect and OAuth for authorization and authentication. And I built some of the logic in logic apps and stored the secrets in a key vault. This made it possible to obstruct that layer from the user, but also I got to just build and test that functionality in Azure as well. So basically I had the authorization and authentication part and renewing the access token with the refresh token and so on. This is all in the logic app part. On the user side, the user only ever see the access token, not the refresh token, not the client ID, not the secrets and anything. So users are just triggering a request to get an active access token from the logic app. That is done via a flow, and then we also have some other flows that use that access token going to the remote API at Hue, and then we can start exploring and controlling the lights. The other part of the solution is using Teams and presence in Microsoft Graph, so that when my presence is available or my lights are turning green, and when my presence is busy, my lights are turning red, and so on. So this is the overall view of the solution. So I have some recipes. In addition to demoing and showing the solution and taking questions today, I'm providing you with a complete set of recipes how you can create this yourself. First of all, it's a good idea to start learning the API at Postman. Postman is a good way to explore the REST API of any kind of source. I use it a lot against Microsoft Graph, but you can also add any kind of remote API in that client tool. And actually, back earlier this year, in May this year, I wrote a complete blog post on how you can learn and explore the Hue remote API using Postman only. So that's a good starting point to learn the API. Next, I have now in December finally got to write up something I had in draft for a long time. I broke down the series in 10 parts. So the complete series of how to build this solution I'm going to demo later is now published in all those blog parts. I can share those links later in the chat. And accompanying those blog posts, I've also created short videos, the longest in 10 minutes, that's just the introduction, and most of them are 6, 7, 8 minutes. And for each of the blog posts I have published, I just do a quick introduction to the topic. So these are good learning resources to start if you want to explore something like similar like me. So with that, I'm finished with the presentation part, because I know people are not here for a presentation, I think, primarily anyway. I'm interested to show the solution. So let's start by that, and just keep the questions coming in the chat window, and I will answer as soon as I see them or have a chance to get to that. So let's first look at the solution. So if I go to this app and just do a refresh, I clean out some data earlier. So I have an OK connection to Hue, but no user is linked. This is typically the first thing a user will see. From here I can click on enable link button and whitelist user, but this really demands that I have set up a connection to Hue first. So let's go another step back and look at the beginning of it all. So if I go to my Hue developer portal, so when you you bought your Hue system, you can go to the developer portal. It's free, and you can start registering apps here. This is much like an app registration in Azure Active Directory, for example, but you have to add a new application, and you can call that, for example, Elven Festive Hue app. And then I need a callback URL. And that callback URL, it could be, for example, it could be just localhost, something just to explore to begin with. And then I have a quick description for demo at Festive Tech Calendar. And if I want to, I can add some company name and location. But I'm not doing that now. And then when I click submit, I'll get back. Let's see. There we are. So now I have a new app ID, and with that I get the client ID and I get the client secret, and I can change the callback URL later. So that's cool. This client ID and the client secret, these are the values I talked about earlier, the credential information you might want to keep a bit personal. So if I go back to let's see here, if I go back to my Azure subscription, let's see here, I will just refresh. As when I talked about the solution, I elected to store those secrets in a key vault. So I have a key vault specific for this purpose, and I have a couple of secrets there. I have the client ID stored, and I have the secret stored. This is from the other app registration I have that's actually working now. So and also I have the bearer token, which is I have stored it as a JSON object. So that object contains the access token, refresh token, and so on. So let's go in and type, because I don't want to demo my real IDs. So I will just now let's say no, I'm going back on that. I don't want to change that now, but maybe for if you just want to do create a new connection at all, then you can just go in and create that, and then the connection to Hue will be lost when next time you refresh. So let's instead look at my logic apps. So if I go to Logic Apps and click here, I will see that I have actually a few, some of them are for test, but I have two Logic Apps, one for authorizing and one for getting access token. So the authorize part, this looks like the following. And that's another reason I wanted to do in Logic App, because basically I can work in the same way I do with Power Automate flows. So here I've created an HTTP trigger, and this URL here, then this is the webhook URL I will use for the app registration. So if I go back to this one, I will just go here and select that as the callback URL. So that made it possible for me to process that authorization code and get the access token. So save on this one, and going back to the Logic app, I can now look at the next steps. So when I do an authorization request to the Logic app, to Phillips Hue, then I will be redirected back to the Logic app, and the Logic app will pick up on the queries from the response that get back, and then I can go in and check for my client ID, reading that using Azure REST API. It's just querying the URL for my key vault and the name of the secret. And I also use a managed identity, so I have created a managed identity for the Logic app, so that I can use that to authenticate against the key vault, and also retrieve the secret. And then I basically encode that client ID and that secret as a base 64 string. Which is a requirement for the Phillips remote API, as it often is with a basic authentication for OAuth queries. So, and then I post that authorization code back to the remote API, the code I retrieved from the input, and with the encoded value for client ID and password. So this will get me an access token returned. Then I need to find out when does that access token expire. So I'll add, I will use a timestamp, and I will add that access token expires in, because I received that in a number of seconds. And this will be value 7. So I add that to today, and then I have to do some conversions, because there are two types of timestamp integers. There are ticks and there are epoch. Epoch is Unix type, and ticks is 64-bit, and epoch is 32-bit. So the 32-bit starts in 1970 and runs to 2038 or something. So I need to do some conversions. I've explained that in detail in my blog, but accompanying this series. But basically, I end up with a timestamp that is valid for 7 days from now, because that's the usual access token lifetime. And then I go back and set that secret set the bearer token key vault secret with an expiration date based on that timestamp. So this means that I can set an expiration for those key vaults and the token I store there. And then I will use that for renewing just when I need to do that. And that's something I've seen different solutions, and if you're not sure when the access token, you can do that as a reactive part. You can search for errors when you're trying to use an access token, and then you get a reply, okay, it's expired, and then you renew, for example. I just wanted to be a little bit more proactive and use timestamp for secret expiry. So if I go back to my key vault and look at the Power platform and the secrets, and I'll go and select the bearer token, and then you can see that it has an expiration date, and older versions have previous expiration dates. So basically after 7 days, and next time I use the solution, it will be renew at that point, and that point only. So next time my access token expire is 18th of December. So back to the logic apps and the authorize part. So I built this logic app authorize to just handle the redirect from the Hue developer portal and get the access token and store it, and also set that expiry. The next logic app I've created is the one that brings the access token back to the any caller. So in that example, whenever an HTTP request is received for that URL, and this is the URL I'm using at PowerAutomate on the user side. So I call this and I get the secret bearer token. So and then I do a compose just to bring out the value from the key vault secret, and I do the same calculations for just evaluating if the secret is expired or not. And if it's expired, then I have to go and retrieve the client ID secret and post to the refresh endpoint at Phillips Hue, and with the refresh token get a new access token, and then write that back to Key Vault again. If not, if it hasn't expired, I just respond with the access token back to the calling user. And this is where I've implemented the logic, because flow users on the user side of things, they are just getting the access token, but not anything else. So that's the logic part of this. Of course, you could have built all this in PowerAutomate as well. You can create an incoming webhook HTTP request also in Flow and use that as the redirect URI from the Hue developer portal. Going back to the user side of things, first of all, I've created here a link where I can click to connect and authorize Phillips Hue with OAuth. If I click on that, I will be taken to the Phillips Hue developer portal, and where I need to sign in and get permission consent dialog. So I'm in the wrong session here, but I will just do like this. So if I go here and copy the same request and sign in with my user, and from there, okay, I think I maybe skip the process a little bit later. But basically, you will see the screenshots from my accompanying blog post. But in this case, I will just be asked if I trust this application, and I will grant that access, and then I will be returned back to get that connection. The next thing is I will enable a link button and whitelist the user. This is similar. If you have experience with Hue, you need to press that button from time to time if you are connecting new equipment or something, and you also need to do that for exploring the remote API. So by clicking on that, I'm creating a username for my user. And here I needed to have some logic as well. So I've created a SharePoint list, Microsoft list, inside a team. So this team would, for example, be shared between every user that wants to use this solution. So here I go and just create I used the title column. This will be by display name, and a whitelist identifier is something Phillips Hue require, a username for exploring the API. A device type is just the name of the device I'm sitting on. And I also have created some columns for graph subscription. So if I go into back to the PowerApp, and the first time I use this app from my user perspective, I have to click on Enable Link button. And then I get the name of my bridge, my IP address, the API version connected, and so on. And if I go back to this list now, I can see that my user has been connected. So now if I share this solution with other users in my organization, they can also connect their user. They will get their own whitelist identifier. That's the username part against Phillips Hue. But basically we can have a multi-user setup against the same bridge. Let's go in and look at the next part of the PowerApp, and that's the control lights part. So what I'm doing here is the first time I launch the app on the new launch, I just do a request to get the lights, and now all my lights have been filled in this drop down. And I can go, for example, and select I have a light strip here at my office. Kontor is office for on Norwegian, and I can now start manually set the lights. This was something I started with, so I can set them to green, I can set them to red or yellow, I can turn them off and on, and so on. So let's see if I have the lights up in the ceiling here. So I will just move the camera a little manually, and you should see the light strips at the top here. So if I just click on the green one, so it's green. It's a little bit difficult to see in the contrast here. And red, yes, looks kind of fishy. And yellow. So I can just click on those buttons to set the color manually. And I also have, if you look at the screen, I also have a selected light state on and off. So I can do off, dark, and on again. Yeah, I saw that when I set it on, it was reset to a lower brightness. So that's some logic I have to fix. And I can also control the brightness on a scale from 1 to 254. So I can just do that with my lighting here in the PowerApp. So this is the manual part. And if I go, let's see. Oops. Right. So this is the manual part. The next part is in fact setting the lights based on the team's presence and syncing the lights automatically. So if I go and just have this sync here, it will tell me if I'm available or not. So if I go back to Teams, for example, and go and set manually to do not disturb, and then go back to the PowerApp. It should in a few seconds update with that status. At least if I click on it, because I have created a manual refresh here as well. I have a hidden trigger control that automatically polls the team's presence for API for presence status. So maybe that had stopped in the background now. So I can do change my and see the current team's presence updated in the PowerApp. But the most important or an interesting part is this one. Because if I do sync lights with teams, I will actually create a graph subscription to any events that change when the presence for my users changes. So yeah, if you maybe saw that there was a bright red color coming now because I had it to do not disturb, like this, you know. And if I go back to Teams now, let's try and set this to available again. And then we wait. And it's green. And I can change back to, okay, I'm busy. Oops, red. So it works. Now it's synchronizing my light status from Teams using the Teams presence and a graph subscription. So there's a lot of logic behind this PowerApp. Most of the PowerApp is using flows, so I can go in and show some of that logic. So on the flow side, I actually have quite a few flows now. One of them is a new version because the old one was starting to act funny. So basically, these the flows I have now is one for setting lights and state, and I have one for getting lights and state. And I have a flow for link and whitelist user, and I have a flow for getting the access token and the configuration from the Hue bridge. And for the graph part to synchronize, I have a flow to create that subscription, and then I have a webhook for getting the presence change. So these are the most important flows in the solution, and I've written about all of them in different parts of the blog post series. So let's start by looking at the get access token and config. It will be something like this. I can go in and see just the previous run here. And you can see I first I trigger this from PowerApps, and then I will call my logic app. So I'm calling the logic app I've created, and then it returns the access token. So I'll just show you the access token here, because I will renew it later. So, but basically you shouldn't show the access token to anyone. And then I just get the username of my user, and I will use that to check against that SharePoint list I talked about earlier. So I will just check, are there any users configured for my user or not? And if username is empty, because I didn't have the link and whitelisting earlier, then I will either return the access token or return the config. So in this case, I just return the access token back to the application. But I have prepared a JSON object here with the name and IP address and the API version and so on for showing in the PowerApp. So this will be returned to the PowerApp. And later I went in and let's see, and did the Hue whitelisting and linking. So this is where I clicked on the button, and then suddenly I got all the configuration. So here I'm supplying in the access token as an input to the flow from the PowerApp. So in the next part I'm getting the username and my user email for the calling user, and then I will check, is the user already linked? Do I have a user entry for this user in this list? If so, I will do a condition on that. So if false, then I enable the link button, which is a command I send to the bridge. Just the link button true, it's a put command, and then I can add a request to create a user, and this is where I add in the name of my device. I basically had a naming standard where I just said that the name of the devices is PowerApps, my user email, and the remote. And then I get back a username. This is the whitelist identifier I need for query against Hue API. So I can parse the output here just to make it easier to use that in the later process. And then I add a user to the table or to the list. So I add that in as a new list item to this list, if it was missing, of course. And in the next part, I can then go and get the configuration from the remote API. So now I have a username which will always be a part of every request I do to Phillips Hue. And I can respond that back to the PowerApp, because I get a lot of information from my Hue bridge here. Not only the information I elected to show, but a lot of the other information as well. So this is a complete configuration for my Hue bridge. And I can return that in a customized object, and then I will just use that in the PowerApp. For the flows that do, let's see, yeah, the flows that, sorry, back one more, that gets the light state and sets the light state. I will just show that as well. So in this case, I'm calling all the API to get all my lights. I will also here have to supply the access token. And then I will go in and get each of the lights. I'm going to show a little thing here for you from Postman. This is something I had to scratch my head in a little bit, because when I do a request for all the lights from the Hue Remote API, it returns not an array. It returns named objects by a number for each of my lights. So there's no way I can dynamically read the number of lights, for example. So every time I connect a new light, it will have the name 1 or 2 or and so on. So what I did, and there might be other solutions for doing this, but what I did was I initialized an array, and initialized the first light number 1, and then I initialized a variable called a number of lights. So this is the number of lights I have. So if I buy a new light and couple that up, I have to go in and change that variable, because then I can do a do until loop, and for each of the 1 to 13 I get that light. So I will do that in 13 loops in my case here. So I will get one light at a time, and then I will append the light data I just wanted to get the light number, the name of the lamp, and the state if it was true or off. And by incrementing, I can go to the next one in the do until loop. And then I can just respond the lights array back to the user. So basically that response looks like this. Every light number and name of the lamp and state if it's on or not. So back in the PowerApp for these how I call this. If I go to, for example, the control light button, I do I created a collection. It's called my Hue lights, and then I call that Hue get light and state flow, and then I supply the response that contains the access token into that flow. I also go and set the presence based on the graph presence connector. So basically that means that when I go into the screen here, I will just connect that screen to that collection, my Hue lights connection, and using the name as the list text value here. But I also have the numbers for them. So when I go in, for example, and set lights, I will call the Hue set light and state flow, and then I will just respond with the selected light number, which is the one I'm clicking on here, and the state of the light. And the state of the light I set as a variable, and if it should be on or off, and the colors are noted in X, Y coordinates, which is a different system than RGB. Hue have a good explanation for that. It can be a little bit difficult to calculate those values, but there are some functions and something you can do with it. So, and I also do the brightness. I send that in. So this is the calling back. So basically, I have one collection, and that's the Hue light. I fill that from the response from the flow. It's only previewed the first 5 here, and I use some variables that when I click on the different buttons or on the different events, I have some variable, for example, the Hue response that contains the access token and the config details. I have a variable for the presence. I have a variable for my light state, which is one I just continually update every time I do something changes with the lights, and if it's on or not. And also the selected light, I fill that every time I change a light in the drop-down list. I update this record, which tells me which light and should it be on or off. So basic stuff working with variables and collection, but it's very useful for also containing the data in the remote solution. So a few words around specific graph components. So for getting presence from Microsoft Graph, you need to create an app registration, and that app registration needs to have a client ID that will come automatically when you create the app registration, and then you need to create some kind of secret, and that secret will be used in the Power Platform. And for authentication, I have created a redirect URI which turns back to Power Platform and custom connectors, because I'm getting the team's presence via a custom connector. I'm also needing some permissions. So I need to have the presence read permission for users. Note that getting presence actually don't require admin permissions. So basically, as an end user, you might be able, if you're not admins have blocked any app registration to your Azure AD, you can do this yourself. But if your admin has blocked end user possibility to register apps, then you might need some help. But there are no admin consents, you just need that presence read. And basically, querying for presence, let's see here. It's done a lot of work with subscriptions. So I'm just going to the beta endpoint. It's not in production yet, and I go and say graph.microsoft.com beta me presence and run that query, and I will get my presence, which is now away. Basically, I can change if I go here and change that to available again, and go into Graph Explorer and run another query. You'll see I'm available. So this is the endpoint at Microsoft Graph that I'm using. So to get Microsoft Graph and delegated request on the behalf of user into PowerApps, then you have to create that famous custom connector. So I have a custom connector defined. This is something also I describe in part 9 of the series, I think. So I have a presence connector here, and this is created so that let's see here, I have a connection and I can test that, and you can see it gets me the status back. So there are some details in how to set it up, but then I can call this connector in my Power App, and as you can see, when I, for example, click manually on that button, it sets my presence, which is a variable, based on the output from that custom connector. And now comes the most important part. That's the sync thing. When I click toggle sync on and off, I will go in and call a flow that creates or updates or removes a graph subscription. And I will do a subscription for the selected light number and based on the toggle value, if it's true or not. If it's true, then I will also start a timer. That's the timer I talked about earlier. It's hidden. It's a timer that or something hidden over here, and this is the one that updates that icon. I didn't find a very good way to update a Power App back from outside the environment, so I'm just running a timer function there. But selecting to create that graph subscription, it will go into, I have the possibility here to look at subscriptions, and now you can see I have an active subscription, and this subscription will go in and notify this URL, which is the Power Automate flow I created, for resource, communications, presences, and this is the user ID for my user in my test environment. So basically this will, every time a presence change, this subscription will be triggered, and it will send that request to that URL. And that URL is the webhook for my Power App flow. So if I go to my flows, and this is the one, Hue graph notification presence change. And if I click on edit on that, so this is Microsoft Graph with, that will trigger this. And when you create a new subscription, you need to get a client state, which is some random secret string you will have, and you can then initialize the light state, which is the incoming value for what I'm just initializing here first. Of course, I'm creating an empty JSON object, But later I will fill that JSON object with what kind of light source or color or something I want to do. The first time you create a graph subscription, you need to handle that response by responding back with an incoming validation token and respond that back to Microsoft Graph. Then Microsoft Graph will know that, okay, we have a real webhook in the other hand, and we can go proceed and create the actual subscription. And then I will, in the next part, it will respond. It must respond by 202. This is something that's well documented in Microsoft Graph, how to create subscriptions. And then you can, I can start parsing that object. So this is where I go in for a selected user, and I do a verification of the client state. If the client state match my configured client state, this is just for, let's say that somebody got to my URL, my secret notification URL for Microsoft Graph. If they got to that URL, they also need to know this client secret, the secret state I created, just to, this is an extra security measure. And then I will be able to do some, for example, if Microsoft Graph says that now in my teams I'm available, then I will set the light state green, and it will build a JSON object. Let's see here. I didn't. Let's see. I'm setting the variable. I didn't get to see the contents correctly. Something hanging, but I can do this. P code. So here it is. So I'm creating via the JSON function an actual object that sets the value to on and brightness and the color values and so on. So a little bit technical, but it works very good when it first get to set it up correctly. And then I can retrieve the access token and set that light state based on that variable. So this is what makes it possible to change lights automatically. Wow, I think we covered most of it. There are, without a doubt, some details here that I missed or maybe went through too fast, but I managed to show the complete solution, I think. So I'm open for questions now, the last few minutes of the show. See, I have some colleagues in here, that's great. Colleagues from Norway, and Gregor, and yeah, maybe one or two other have been inside here. This will be available later as a recording. Gregor, I think we will upload it to the YouTube channel. Agree? And make it available there later. I said that I could share the links. I see that Gregor has shared the link to my blog. So basically, you will see all the posts from there. So, and I can also add in the channel with the videos. I have a couple of more videos to upload, covering the parts 8, 9, and 10. But the blog posts are already published, so you can start there. I also have an introduction blog post which have links to all the different parts. So I think this was a very, very fun project. As I said, I learned tons of new stuff when doing this. A lot of tricks and tips and tricks inside Power Automate platform. also with Logic apps. Yeah, it was really fun, and I've learned a lot. It has been, the solution has been working since earlier this year. I think I managed to set up the most of it when after Corona came, and I sat at home and start playing with lights and so on. From after the summer, when Microsoft Teams and the presence came in the Graph API, then I started to look into that presence automatically get notified and so on. So that brought the whole solution together really. So I use it when working at the home office. I've created the Power App as a canvas app, so I can and phone layout, so I can use it on my phone. So basically, it shows how a lot of different components can collaborate together, and also using a remote API from another vendor. So yeah. So we are just over time. I'm here if you want to ask anything else. Yeah, I have a couple of more things to build. We have been working on a couple of stuff for using more against Graph API. It might be that I'm planning to do something more against the home office, but for now I'm looking at using Power Platform against privileged identity management in Azure AD, for example, so you can elevate your roles and something. So yeah, there are different scenarios, especially against Graph. I think it's very usable to do in the Power Platform. Yeah, Gregor, you asked if I can do a talk on this. This is a lot of content to cover in a typical session, but it's very possible. The hardest part, well, I think I did have a little bit of starting issues when I started exploring the authentication part. Actually, I did the first part of the authentication doing Azure Functions. So I created some Azure Functions that retrieve that authorization code and store the access token in an app settings inside the function. I didn't get to keyword at that point, but I managed to get it to work. But understanding the process, it was very useful learning. Basically, I've been working a lot with OF recently against Azure AD, and a lot of different scenarios with the APIs you can have in Azure AD yourself. So that had a good impact as well. So basically, it was a little bit time consuming, and I think, for example, let's say going into PowerApps or flows, then you can go in and you can expect something like you get a number of seconds for a timestamp, and then you need to have 3-4 actions to do a lot of conversions and so on, and something that you might think it's just an easy conversion is not. So that is something that was maybe a challenge. Yeah. So it's Friday. I have my all I want for Christmas is akevitt, Christmas weather. So, and I think I will just finish by that. Little drink, and thanks for watching. And I will just end this now. It's a great experience. Little startup problems, but hope you learned something. Until next time.